The twists and turns of the college football playoff race have started, and we saw that with Week 11 with some upsets, some changes in conference races. Despite the fact that we didn't really have a bunch of marquee matchups this week, there were still some great football, some close finishes, almost some upsets. We saw some upsets. It was a really fun weekend. Week 12 is going to be really good, especially in the SEC. There's some big games coming up. But Week 11, that's what we're talking about here, our takeaways, and we'll start with the November chaos and close calls have begun. So we saw some big upsets, and then we saw some close calls. So how about the Indiana-Penn State game? Penn State, no one gave them any shot really in this game. They fought to the end. Indiana had to make that crazy play, that catch at the end to win this game on fourth down. That drive just overall was just incredible. Indiana did look beatable watching them in this game, but you have to also acknowledge the fact that they did what they had to do to win the game. Same thing with what we saw with Oregon. Oregon had a close call against Iowa, but they were able to win that game. But then we did see some upsets, especially a couple of them in the ACC. So let's just go ahead and jump into our next takeaway, which these kind of go together. But yeah, let's talk about this. So my takeaway is a two-loss ACC team all of the two-loss ACC teams still have a great shot to get into the college football playoffs. So we're talking about, first of all, those upsets. Louisville going down at home to Cal. Did not see that one coming. Virginia, Wake Forest, also Virginia at home in that game. That one wasn't that crazy of an upset, but still, I thought Virginia would probably take care of business, again, with that game being at home. So that really shakes things up, because now you see we've got 5 one-loss teams. We've got 2 two-loss teams. And this really affects Miami. Miami is back in this thing. They have a real shot to make the ACC championship. And the reason why all of these teams, even the two-loss teams, are still alive is because the one-loss teams all have tough games left on their schedule. And a lot of them play each other. So let's just run through the schedule. We'll start with Virginia. So Virginia has to play at Duke, and they have to play Virginia Tech. Decent chance that they lose one of those 2 games. So if they do, that's going to knock Virginia down to 2 losses. And then we'll continue on. How about Duke? So Duke might have maybe the most favorable schedule of the teams that are left on, in the ACC that have one loss, because it's really not that bad. If you look at the rest of their schedule, they have that game against Virginia. So obviously, again, one of those teams is going to have 2 losses after that game. They do play on the road at North Carolina, a North Carolina team that's playing a little bit better now. So, I don't know. That could be a loss, potential upset there. And then Wake Forest, who just beat Virginia. So there's a decent chance that Duke loses another game. So then you have a 2-loss Duke team. Then we move on to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has to play on the road at Boston College. Not really worried about that game, but I'm a little worried about the game against Pittsburgh. They play Pitt at home. That is going to be a huge game, and potentially, the loser of that game obviously going to have 2 losses. So let's say Georgia Tech loses that game. Then we've got a 2-loss Georgia Tech team. For Pittsburgh, let's say they win that game. Well, they also have to play on the road at Miami. So if Miami is able to win that game, then all of a sudden Pitt is sitting there with 2 losses. So you can see the chain reaction here, because, it's very possible that we don't have a one-loss team remaining. Again, we talked about Pitt. The one team we haven't talked about is SMU. SMU still has to play Louisville. So if Louisville wins that game, then SMU is down to 2 losses. Louisville's sitting there with, Louisville also has to play Clemson still. If they lose that game, they're at 3 losses. SMU also has to play on the road at Cal. So there are so many different scenarios that could play out here in the ACC, to where I don't know that we're going to have a one-loss team left. I'll say we might have one. I think one of these teams emerges. Maybe it's SMU. I did pick them in my playoff predictions last week. Or maybe it's Duke. Duke has a pretty favorable schedule. Maybe it's Georgia Tech. I think, maybe one of these teams finishes with that one loss. But I feel confident now that a 2-loss team in the ACC is going to make the ACC championship. And you know what that means? It means we could have the most insane tiebreaker that we have ever seen. Like, we could have, let's say Georgia Tech wins out. We could have Virginia, we could have Pitt, SMU, Duke could be in this, and then let's say Miami 5, because I don't think there's no real scenario for Louisville to. Well, I guess there could. Yeah, Louisville could give SMU their loss. So yeah, what if all these teams finish with 2 losses? Like, it is going to be a crazy tiebreaker scenario, in my opinion, in the ACC. So this conference has become, if you remember the old ACC Wheel of Destiny, I think we can bring that back, because that's kind of what it looks like right now. All right, next we go to Texas Tech. Their defense, it's just on another level in the Big 12. We see it time and time again. Biggest game of the weekend. Game day was their top 10 matchup against BYU, and their defense just absolutely dominated. Now, I'm a little bit concerned about their offense. They had to settle for a lot of field goals. BYU's defense, got to give them some credit. But if Texas Tech offense can give them just a little bit, I just don't see a team in the Big 12 beating them the rest of the way. I know they did lose the one game, but didn't have Baron Morton in that one. And I'm also concerned about his health. He's obviously banged up, re-aggravated that injury in this game. So there are some reasons why Texas Tech's not guaranteed to win out and win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff. But their defense, it is so good, and it's hard to see them losing a game in the Big 12. Again, the defense is just on another level. So big win for them. They blow out BYU mostly because, again, of their defense. Next, let's go to the Big Ten. Now, the Big Ten's chances of 4 college football playoff teams, those are slipping away. It's now looking unlikely, I would say, because here's what you got to have. You got to have a team beat Oregon and win out. That's what you need. That's really, obviously, Michigan beating Ohio State. That's another way that you could get it. But let's just say that's not going to happen. Ohio State's going to be a big favorite, I believe, in that game this year. As good as their defense has been playing. But, well, again, Michigan winning that game, that's going to get, more than likely, going to get you 4 teams in. But let's say they don't win that game. You need, first of all, you need Iowa potentially to beat Oregon and win out. Well, that didn't happen. Close call, but they did not quite get it done. Then you've got USC also playing Oregon. They need to win that game and win out. And that's really probably the only scenario that could play out to get 4 teams in. Again, if Michigan does not beat Ohio State. Because the big problem here is now Washington, they get upset by Wisconsin, and so Washington winning out, they're going to be 9-3. They're not going to get in. So you saw Washington go down. You didn't get the Iowa win over Oregon. And again, I'm just saying if you're rooting for 4 Big Ten teams. So you really are counting on USC. I don't know if I'm going to count on USC to beat Oregon and win out. I just don't really think that's going to happen. Maybe it does. But it does look more and more likely that we're going to see three Big Ten teams in the college football playoff instead of 4. And then there's still, like, what happens if Oregon loses to USC and Washington both, and USC slips up somewhere else? There is a real scenario where only 2 Big Ten teams get in. So, the schedules just did not work out very well for the Big Ten this year. You don't want to see, if Iowa had a little bit easier of a schedule, they would have had a much better chance to maybe get in there, although they've lost some close games. They really had their opportunities. It just didn't work out very well. Michigan, if Michigan just doesn't play Oklahoma, they're sitting there with 1 loss, and doesn't really matter what happens against Ohio State. They're probably going to be in the playoffs, so they're getting penalized for playing that non-conference game. The schedule just didn't work out very well for the Big Ten this year to get a lot of teams into the playoff. But we are seeing the SEC with a real shot to get, very possibly 5 teams in the playoff, because we just haven't seen any chaos. And for as much parity as there has been in this conference, for as many close games as we have seen, we just have not gotten that chaos in the SEC that we've gotten in some of the other conferences. Like, if you look back at the last few weeks, where have we seen a big upset? Ole Miss was able to upset Oklahoma, but that wasn't a huge upset. They were higher than them in the rankings. And then we saw Oklahoma go on the road and upset Tennessee. Again, not a huge upset, but that's the biggest shakeups that we've had. Texas A&M just keeps winning. Alabama just keeps winning. Georgia keeps winning. Ole Miss keeps winning. Texas now getting back on track. They've won 4 in a row. Vandy had the 1 loss, but other than that, they're still, looking pretty good. Oklahoma, they're going to get Alabama. If they win that game, really good shot that they make the playoff. Tennessee, Missouri, they've probably fallen out of it, although Tennessee was ranked for whatever reason last week, so maybe if they win out, they can climb back in. I don't think so. Really, all they would have left would do that one over Vanderbilt. But yeah, you're looking at, scenarios where, let's say Texas A&M, really the team that could shake things up is Texas, because Texas could beat Georgia and Texas A&M. Texas A&M and Georgia would still be in the playoff. Then you'd have Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas. Let's say Vandy wins out. They could be in. Let's say Oklahoma beats Alabama and Alabama doesn't lose to anyone else. Oklahoma's going to be in. Alabama's still going to be in. Like, is it possible we could see 7 teams out of the SEC? I mean, if things line up just right, and that sounds crazy, but it almost seems like, it wouldn't work out because Indiana and Ohio State are both going to get in out of the Big Ten. I don't see any way that one of those teams gets behind. So what would happen if that did play out is we'd have a 10-2 SEC team left out. So yeah, there's still chaos that could happen, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to. It just seems like the teams at the top are going to keep winning. And for all these games that have been so close, it's the teams have still separated themselves in their ability to just win football games. The teams that know how to win, they know how to win and they win. And the teams that don't, they lose these games. There's not a big gap in terms of how good these teams are. The gap is just in their ability to finish and win football games. And these teams at the top have been able to do that. So those are my 5 takeaways from Week 11. Give me your takeaways down in the comments below.